great background already. He's really invested himself in learning from some awesome groups and organizations and individuals. Gray Institute, NSCA, Institute of Motion. I just mentioned Michelle Dalcourt, as well as really investing in his neuroscience education and really taking a different approach to exercise. He's learned from the Neurocoaching Institute, Neuroscience Academy, and Dr. Daniel Amen's Institute, which I'm pretty excited about as well because I like a lot of Dr. Amen's stuff. So great background. So Ryan, why don't you just kind of give a little bit more very quickly about your background, and then you can jump right into it.
Yeah, thank you, Cody. So everyone, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate everyone's dedication and passion for continued education. Certainly that's where my drive has been. I got into personal training after being obese and sedentary as a kid. In high school, I joined a gym and lost it all and stayed fit, and I wanted to help other people do the same. So very common story there, but I watched my mom go through kidney disease, neuropathy, dialysis. She had a leg amputation, so I had to watch her go through physical therapy, and I was inspired by how that rehabilitation was conducted. And so I started on a path towards looking at physical therapy. I lived in West Africa in a country called Gambia for about a year before pursuing more continued education, where I worked with kids with cerebral palsy in their physiotherapy clinic. And so around that time, I started to really get a fascination for the nervous system about 5 years into my career. And I was helping people with pain and corrective exercise and achieve better function, but I was really wondering what was going on up top. And I knew I had the tools. I knew I could help people with exercise, diet, sleep, lifestyle, but specifically movement and exercise. And how could I use that as a medium for helping my clients achieve their cognitive, psychological, or neurological goals? And that's what today is really all about. And so I have dedicated the past 2 years of my career to diving deep into neuroscience through books, continued education courses, and talking with experts, and seeing if we can create a system that's applicable and practical, and of course results-based, that uses neuroscience, but uses it to achieve outcomes of cognition. Because I do believe in our industry, we're meant to do so much more than just physical outcomes alone. And I think looking at what's going on in the brain and how we can specifically target different goals of cognition and executive function is exactly where we're going today. There's many ways of doing this, and I have a few different ways of doing it myself. I'm a brain health coach, so I talk to people over the phone or in person about how to manage their lifestyle environment and use allied health professionals and other interventions to achieve their cognitive psychological goals. And then I'm also working with several people in the research field to create ways of enhancing cognition during exercise. Cognitive decline is a very popular phrase you hear nowadays, along with cognitive impairment, but we are aware of this idea that the body declines over time. But that shouldn't stop us from understanding the principles that the body is adaptable and plastic, and you can function better at any given point in your life. And very much is true for the brain. While cognitive decline is inevitable, like physical decline, we can actually make changes. But I do want to say that especially for the population that many of us work with, in the senior population, the aging population, there's a lot of cognitive things to be aware of, whether it's dementia, neurological conditions like multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's. We do want to understand that cognitive decline is a part of that equation. And one of the reasons we're doing what we're doing is to not only prevent it, but see what we can do when there is cognitive decline. And one of the things that I feel is very convincing is if you look at the costs associated with obesity, pain, orthopedic injuries, which is why a lot of us get into what we're doing, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, what far exceeds the costs of all of those worldwide are things related to the brain. A cognitive decline and neurological disease and disorders cost a lot more in many different aspects. I don't have too many numbers because there's too many numbers to give, but it's a very convincing area that needs a lot of help, and I think we are very much primed to help with that area. Another reason we're doing what we're doing is because the negative effects of day-to-day. So if you are my age, you're 26, I want to start preventing dementia and things that might come on, but right now I'm not really feeling it. But I am basically putting my head into a screen at all times, and I do suffer from the negative effects of certain things in my environment, whether it's screen time, sedentary behavior, poor nutrition, stress levels. And we need to be able to use exercise as a medium, not just to overcome that, but cognitively specific exercise can help us with things like improving attention. And if you know the information age that you live in now, you probably have noticed that your attention is not as good. Your executive function might be diminishing slightly. And so I think this is a funny picture. Sometimes this is what it feels like. It's just you're stuck to a screen and it's just not what it used to be. So we do have different cognitive considerations. A lot of people talk about, well, we're all sitting down, we're all sedentary nowadays, and that means you have to move around and stretch your hip flexors and all these things that we keep hearing. But what about the cognitive side of that? What is the cognitive aspect of sedentary behavior and screen time? And that is another reason why we should be involving ourselves in understanding about the brain, but also how to get us towards higher cognitive function, better cognitive function. So what is executive function? I keep referring to this term. And what is cognitive function? Cognitive function is a range of mental processes that you use to interact with your environment and your day-to-day. And so executive function is this term that comes up in the research and is starting to come up in the mainstream a little bit more. And it's an umbrella term for all these different types of processes. So what might it include? It includes attention. Can you focus your attention on one thing for a long period of time? Can you focus regardless of distractions? That's called selective attention. Can you focus on multiple things at one time? That's called divided attention or multitasking. There's different types of attention, which we won't get into too much, but attention's included here. Decision-making and impulse control, planning and organization, cognitive flexibility and adaptability to situations and environments, memory, working memory, episodic semantic memory, and inhibition, the ability to stop yourself from giving into certain impulses, whether it's eating that chocolate cake or just doing something or saying something you wish you didn't. So executive function is with us every second of the day, even if you're sleeping, and it really concerns us in terms of how we interact with our environment and does have a lot to do with behavior change. And while we won't be getting into behavior change today, because it is a separate, more advanced topic, well, I wouldn't say advanced, but it is another topic, we're going to mostly focus on cognition. And behavior change does concern cognition, but cognition directly being our goal to achieve cognitive performance, achieve cognitive health. But I will be referring to this term executive function. So just know it's like referring to a large muscle group by saying executive function. So this is what I mentioned earlier. This is the general cognitive trajectory of an individual's lifespan. We start high and we go a little bit lower. And the reason we don't start low, if you notice that you start high, is because when we come out of the womb, we are very imprintable, we are very plastic. That's where many of the changes occur. We don't start, when we're born, we start with some sort of limited physical abilities. So that's why it starts low, goes high, and comes down. But here we start high and go all the way down. And this is what we're looking at slowing. If you see on this graph, it says first hit, second hit. It doesn't mean a literal hit. It could if it's a concussion or something like that. But think of this as the negative effects of daily life. It could be a psychological condition. It could be a concussion. It could be excessive screen time. Imagine every time you have a negative input to your central nervous system, there's some sort of initial and sometimes temporary decrease in executive function and cognitive threshold. So what we're looking at doing is improving cognitive threshold and trying to lengthen this out over the lifespan. And talking about age, Harvard University Center on the Developing Child put this out. This is a great chart because we see the brain's ability to change in response to experiences starts extremely high early in life. And therefore, the amount of effort such change requires increases with age. So why does this matter? Is because if we read something saying that aerobic exercise or a certain type of exercise can actually have neuroplastic effect, positive effects on the brain, it does depend what age you're at, what type of modality you're doing, and let's say the cognitive load, the actual volume of that intervention you're providing based on your age. So as you get older, we might theorize that you might need a lot more input to your central nervous system as well as your body in order to get the change you might want. And so what are some cognitive issues? Why should I care about cognition? And so I'm going to roll through this chart. It does seem intimidating, and just to let you know, neuroscience can be sometimes. But when I say cognition and why should I care about it, there are various issues that can come with lower or suboptimal cognitive function. And this is even for young, healthy adults. So let's start with the branch of attention. So under executive function, like we said earlier, includes attention. And you may struggle with impulsivity or response inhibition. Maybe you do or say something that you didn't want to, and maybe you only controlled that impulse, but it took too long or something like that. Maybe you have problems sustaining attention. I know that's true for me. Maybe you have challenges shifting attention, and shifting attention would be going from one task to another. And a lot of people exhaust their attentional resources by doing this excessively, and that ends up being multitasking. So we've heard that's one thing that's not typically good for your attentional resources. And then this is a big one, difficulty with goal-directed persistence. Maybe you have trouble picking a goal and sticking to it. You might be motivated, you might have all the tools you need, but you're just distracted by other things. And so think about this for yourselves, but also think about this for your clients. If they don't pay attention to when you're working with them or talking with them, or maybe they're out in the real world trying to implement the things you're trying to have them do, and they have difficulty with goal-directed persistence. They can't shift attention from what they're working on to their self-care. That might be an issue, and that's one of the reasons addressing attention would be important. Another one is productivity. We are in the cognitive age. We're not in the industrial revolution anymore. We use our brains to work and create value. And so it's really important to have sharp attention. Issues with management. We could have problems with task initiation, difficulty with organization, difficulty with time management, problems with planning, difficulties prioritizing. If you struggle with any of these, your immediate economic value in the US and currently the workplace and type of industries we are in goes down. Because if we can't be productive, if we can't be efficient, we actually are less successful. And there are studies linking socioeconomic success to executive function. But this could be any task. This could be organizing anything. It could be organizing your health routine, your self-care routine. It could be initiating a task that could be an exercise, or it could be initiating a task that's writing an article. So this is very important, looking at planning and organization. Metacognition, problems with self-monitoring, difficulties with self-awareness, problems with self-regulation. I love that mindfulness and meditation are becoming mainstream. It definitely falls under this bucket. That can be a strategy for us. But self-regulation is a really big thing because some people train too hard. They don't train at all. They're not aware of their bodies when they might need corrective exercises, functional exercises, different types of exercises, variability. We say, oh, I wish you could just feel it, or once you feel it, do this. But they may not have the self-regulation ability or the self-awareness. And so we as health professionals, fitness professionals, should be able to help achieve more of that. Then mental state, this is a huge one. A lot of people ask about psychology. And when I say, oh, I'm a brain health coach, or I train the body and the brain, they immediately think of mindset. They think of psychology because that's what's in the mainstream. They say, oh, the brain is everything, mindset's everything. But it's also just a subdivision of cognitive function, of executive function. And so we could call a branch of this mental state. And that can include effort, which is slow processing speed on some tasks, which you may have seen with your clients. Maybe they can't execute a task. And looking at a non-exercise environment, maybe if they go to do a task and they're quick with their email, but they're slow in writing, or they can't process information fast enough to be in front of a camera, or they can't really have a social conversation as fast as they can maybe just talk off the cuff. So slow processing speed with some tasks can be physical and non-physical. Difficulty sustaining effort. So if people start to fluctuate in their effort, whether it be in an exercise or the motivation and effort put into a particular task outside of exercise, that could be something under effort. Trouble regulating alertness. I would also just say energy levels here are considered under cognition. Regulating emotion, people getting easily frustrated. I think everyone can raise their hand and say, I'm guilty of this, because when we're frustrated, it can be difficult to maintain a positive attitude, regulate those emotions. But emotional regulation is sometimes just as cognitive as it is psychological. And so if people have trouble regulating emotions or they get frustrated easily, we might think, oh, something's wrong with me or something wrong with them. And there may not be something wrong with them. Is there a chance that there's potential for some sort of diagnosable psychological condition? Maybe, but it might be just a suboptimal cognitive function. And then memory, one very, very big topic. Difficulty with memory retrieval, word finding, or dysnomia. You might struggle with semantic, short-term, long-term, episodic memory. I know I struggle with verbal fluency and remembering certain words when I need to. When I try to educate, sometimes that doesn't serve me to my advantage. So I make sure I nourish and I move before I have to do that, because those things improve verbal fluency. So memory is a huge one to consider as well. So you had a question, Cody?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think this is right on because just kind of overall in all these different areas of cognition, we tend to kind of globalize the brain and treat it more like the heart, right, as an organ. And certainly it is an organ. So we think, about lifestyle and what's good for the heart is definitely going to be good for the brain. It is an organ, blood flow matters, etc. But
Sure.
really, what you're going to be diving into is these specific areas, correct, and trying to figure out how to dial in physical movements in, to these specific areas, correct?
That's exactly right. And we can look at these almost as muscle groups for the brain. What mental muscles or muscle groups do we want to train? And it's important to do that because then we're a little bit more precise. And so we're going to go over the science of why that would work and what's still to be proven in that area. Because the thing is, that with the brain as an organ, it is hyperconnected. There's a lot of connectivity rules, and it may not be as specific as targeting your gastrocnemius, but we can certainly start with that theory. And there is a good amount of evidence to show that addressing certain subdomains of executive function can be very effective.